It's 2:00. This is Jeff Adams, Community Development Director, and we are back somewhat. I think everyone who knows what the city or is keeping up with it online is that we're back now where boards and committee members are allowed to be in the chamber and meetings. But we're still trying to provide Zoom for everyone else, and currently still not, or back to not allowing public within the chamber during meetings. So it's back to that quasi meeting that we thought we were going to get away from, but it doesn't look like we're going to, at least for a little while. And I even hear from I don't know if Bob or others in running businesses, but I've talked to a couple business owners. Jim might be able to help as well. But I hear this Delta is really hitting workforces as well around the area. And I don't know if it's COVID related, but I know that they're canceling some of the bus runs to Cannon Beach as well. Transit is. So we're having some issues and workforces and things like that.
Yes, the transit closures are they can't find the bus drivers. It's not COVID.
Yeah, that's what I heard, Jim. But I thought that might also have something to do with like a lot of these that we're talking to, where it's a little bit of COVID and a little bit of just all those other things that are thrown in there. So anyhow, I put together a, pretty much the similar agenda that we've had. I want to first tell everybody that I have to be off this at 3:00. It doesn't mean you guys can't continue to talk till the 4:00 hour. I'll keep it up and running, and Katie will be here to take notes and minutes. And yet I have to be at another meeting that was for the transportation. I do want to let everybody know before we start that we've got the first code audit meeting of joint work session tomorrow at 8:00. At 6:00 on the 8th. And then we have the second round of open houses and meetings on the transportation system. And that's going to be on transportation alternatives. And that will be on the 22nd. And that's going to be at 6:00 as well. So there's a lot going on. I expect a lot more that's going to be going on here soon. And I just had a few things I wanted to go over on short-term rentals. And I know there's been a lot going on in the region as far as short-term rentals. And so let me just briefly touch on mine, and then I'll turn everything on over to you guys and let you guys discuss the rest of it. So let me share my screen first. All right, can they see PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, let me start. So just go over briefly the agenda, just to welcome and catch everybody up that I won't go through the task force mission and scope, but I do have that. It's also on the agenda, and we'll keep posting that with the agenda so everybody can keep that review. I get asked that question I just had somebody from Manzanita call up in the past couple of weeks asking for that. And so I tell them it's on that agenda every time as well. I will touch on kind of a data review, some issues we talked about last time, but also some of the things we'll be looking at in the future and what we can expect in the future as far as data. And then the policy update, I think I just touched on a little bit, but you can also go to, I would request everyone go to cannonbeachtsp.com and see some of the documents are posted up there. We should have, like I said, I have to get off this meeting At 3, to have the follow-up on the TSPs. We have a couple other items that should be posted after we get the okay on that call. So I expect by the end of the week to have some more materials up on that website. And then you guys can discuss organizational issues and next steps. And I'll loop back with Katie and find out where you guys want to go. So like I said, task force mission and scope of work has been out there for at least a year and a half since we've been doing this. And as far as the new updates of data, this is us most recently with the numbers for the 5-year lifetime unlimited and 14-day permits and how many. As you can see, we've got a little over 200. It hasn't been too much of a rise. I'd say we're increasing a little bit on the 14-day permit side, but that's because we're starting to see some of those 5-year lotteries phase out. So we're seeing a little bit of a, realignment, if you want to call it, on that. And then that shows in that percentage. So this is the percentage of dedicated to each of the 3 categories. You can see a little bit less in the 5, and that will continue to decline over the next few years as they phase out. One of the things that I've done is, and I'll go to this after, I'm just going to briefly show you, but you guys asked at the last one to look at kind of densities of short-term rentals compared to what we might consider full-time residential and possible second homes. So I've started to look at that. I just haven't had the time to get those final data, but I expect by the next meeting to have that kind of my best estimates at that. And I've started some Google Maps, and this is an example of looking at the blue are what I have termed through voter registration numbers into full-time residents, whereas I've got the green is 14-day, yellow, orange color lifetime, and the purple 5-year. And so I hope to have at least, like I said, by the next meeting, we can start looking at that a little more closely, proximity and densities of these different types of home types in certain areas. And then the other thing that you'd ask about violations, I've also got the latest map on that. And these are the latest numbers up till the meeting time, and from 2019 to 2021, short-term related reports of complaints issued. 24 complaints have been recorded out of the 572 complaints. We've got 27 in a comparison, people just questioning parking. So some of those might be short-term rental related. They're not all identified as that, or, those are just people with parking complaints. You can see how many violations that actually panned out of those 24. We just had 1 out of the parking related. We had 10 of the 27 that issued citations on those. Compare that with right-of-way related issues. We have had 150 complaints. That's often people putting signs or cones in the right-of-way where they should not be doing that. And so that's, you can see a comparison of numbers. And so we've got that. I can map out to some extent those. And this is about the closest level I want to commit to doing that, because I don't really want to, name names or point to unique properties. I want to kind of keep it at a little bit of a anonymized link with that, but we can investigate that or keep an eye on that as we build our data set for consideration after that 4 years or so of our assignment is up. This is going back, and one of the things I wanted to turn to is I had been asked by the city of Manzanita and by Clatsop County, they had seen our earlier short-term rental task force reports and some of the data that I produced for that, and they'd asked for that. And so I gave them both my Cannon Beach census, this is 2010 census data. And then I also have kind of the latest American Community Survey. The difference being is that the census is decennial, so every 10 years. And why, another reason I want to bring this up is because these, the new updates to this, I believe, we might have numbers, and this is, I haven't dug into it yet, but I anticipate we'll have new numbers on this. I don't know, haven't done the research really to verify that, because they did get rid of some of the survey as part of the a part of the census. You know, there's a very political thing right now. And so some have wanted to get rid of the census altogether, and yet we did do a census, and it's still controversial on how much of it's going to be up and running and stay running. But currently, at least, they're going to keep doing this. I just need to investigate. The latest I had heard, or the last time I looked, these numbers were supposed to be out in the spring of next year to update these housing unit numbers. So over a 10 years comparison, we can look at. American Community Survey numbers are very different. They're a 5-year running sample. So they sample survey. It's not like a census, where a census is a direct count, whereas a survey is just a sampling of number of homes and people in the area. And so it's got a lot more margin of error usually. So we have more up-to-date numbers in the ACS, but you know, whether they're more accurate or not, just because they're more recent, that's could be argued. And
Jeff?
Yeah. Yep.
So the green is, when you say vacant housing units, you mean that are second homes. Is that what you're talking about?
No, so I'll break this further down. These numbers are, you have this data already, and I'll show each one of these and you'll see how what I'm saying. So Lisa, this vacant housing units is 58%. Now, if you further refine each one of these into seasonal recreation or other vacants, you'll see that seasonal recreation, or what we're considering maybe like second home and short-term rentals, that's 54%, okay? And so then further along, that's where I break it down into the short-term rentals is 11%, 43% what I would term second homes, okay? And that's broken down. You guys have that in your earlier things. The reason I wanted to touch base on it again, just to tell you that, you know, other areas are looking at this, but we really won't have new updated numbers on this, at least until the spring of next year. And then we'll maybe have a better kind of benchmark to look at and compare against. I can keep giving you kind of short-term rental updates, but they're not this, American Community Survey numbers, but they're not quite the same. They don't even parse it down the same. So this is really our best, or the best we can do right now. And hopefully in the spring, Lisa, I'll get some better data that we can compare to this. And so that's one of the things, as a data kind of guy, I'm kind of, you know, I get excited and look forward to those kind of things. And
just to clarify, this is 2010 data, correct?
Yeah, this is 2010. And yeah, and from all we know of what they released so far from the 2020, Jim, is that, you know, City of Cannon Beach, the population, which is the only thing they really kind of released, is that our population numbers have gone down. If you've kind of looked at the information we're getting so far. These are those compared to our community. And this is kind of what's drawn the attention of Manzanita and Clatsop County, as they're looking at policies and legislation around short-term rentals. They're really interested in, you know, how our numbers compare with theirs and those kind of things. like I said, our 207 short-term rentals that I put in here as the plug-in number. Manzanita has 252 at the time, Seaside had 396, and Gearhart had 80. Those were all done from asking each one of those community to give me their latest short-term rental numbers, and they gave me their numbers. And so I kind of plugged that into the census data to kind of give us a feel and of what portions in comparison. And that's where we get these numbers from. And so what I like to keep in context on all these discussions that we have, because those numbers, whether it's 207 or whatever we're standing at with short-term rentals, that goes back, if you look at those numbers, to 18 or approximately 1,800 total housing units, right? So 200, that's about 1 out of every 9. So there's the famous graphic that it works perfectly here. And really works perfect for us as well, since we're adding about 9 new homes every year over the last 3 years to our inventory. So with every 9 new homes added, you can count on one of those probably being a short-term rental. And the same with where you live. If you live, likely one of those that's surrounding you is a short-term rental. And as far as numbers and counts, and as we move forward in proximity, that's a good way to look at it. That's probably the average across the city. That's what it will likely be. Whereas if you recall, like Lisa brought up, out of all of those, really half of those will be the other four of those other boxes will likely be second homes. So you've got 1 short-term rental and 4 second homes that will likely be surrounding if you're a full-time resident here. So that's just a shorthand example. Like I said, Clatsop County is doing legislation right now or looking at policies, and they've approved a moratorium on short-term rental licensing. That was as of August 26, 2021. And then Manzanita, they've also kind of delved back into it as well. And I think they just passed a new ordinance 2106 that is repealing and replacing 2105. And so you can go to both of their websites, which I'll also put this PowerPoint up on our website that'll have those links. But go to those websites, look into that. That's also, I think, what I've got listed on number 5 on your agenda. I thought if you guys want to touch base on that. So that's really all I wanted to say today. And I thought I'd let you guys kind of discuss what you want to talk about today. Hopefully that gives you some context of where data is standing so far and some of the data that I'm kind of working with or trying to work towards. I also I've gotten funded for a new planner position to help me. And with that builds support for, being able to do some of this kind of data analysis work and helping the short-term rental look at some of this. And because I just don't have the time right now to be looking at it in the depth I like to.
Jeff, obviously I'm not questioning your data, but it is 2010, correct?
Yes.
As you said, and because maybe certain areas of town, everything is concentrated in, I don't know. But when I look at Tolovana Park and I look at my street and the street to the south of me and the street to the south of that, those numbers do not jive with your data at all, of the number of short-term rentals and the number of second homes. So I just don't, I'm not saying the data is wrong. I'm just saying that maybe the concentration in certain areas of town is so different than is reflected in that data, or else the data is just outdated and it's from 2010 and things have changed drastically since then. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you, just from observation and living in this area, none of that is true, that 1 out of 5 houses is a short-term rental. So
1 out of 5 houses? No,
Or
it's
had-
1 out of 9 houses. is a
1 out
short-
of 9, rather, right, your square, your cubes, that your
Yeah.
cube, your 3 cubes across and 3 down. That graphic has no relationship to the reality of the area that I live in.
I'm welcome all, but your numbers, I stand by the numbers, and you can argue it all you like, but honestly, those numbers, especially census data numbers, are pretty darn accurate. And you can maybe quibble with what, but I think what you're missing out on is, yes, there's a lot of areas that have a lot more short-term rentals than other areas. But basically, out of 1,800 housing units, it's still 200. And so, you can argue with how many housing units, but they're pretty darn accurate with those estimates. Any place
Aren't they 210 numbers, or are these more recent numbers?
Well, they're 210, but we also report it back to the Oregon State every year, and it's pretty similar, or they're not too far out of skew.
So
Yeah.
Jeff, to kind of piggyback on what Lisa's asking, based on historical data from the last census to this census, although you probably weren't gathering data the same way, I guess what Lisa might be saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, what might be the margin of error that would sway the number one way or the other? Or do you feel that even though this is 2010, the numbers are the numbers?
These are 2010, but like I said, we're only growing right now. And this is, so, even when I came on board, we have about 3 times more building permits when I came on board. So I know that, most of the years before I got here, so from 2011 through 2017 or so, in that time period, possibly we added 50 homes, but, that's it. So at the most, you're going to have about 80 at tops new homes in that 1,800 to add to it. And like
Okay,
I said,
so what you're saying is that the margin of error from the perspective of this information would be minimal, not major, to really reflect any huge changes from your perspective.
I don't see it. I don't see that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see too much. In fact,
All right.
I think we're going to see less. Like the early numbers have come out for 2020, population is going to be less, so we're going to see less full-time residents. So I agree, I think, with that perspective, but we definitely have not seen any increase in short-term rentals. So if we've seen any increase, it's going to be in the second home area. And there's going to be, more vacant second homes. And so,
But just for clarification, that second vacation homes, on this map, you have full-time residents and all the vacation homes. So does that mean all the buildings that don't have a mark are second homes, essentially?
well, like I said, this is the first time I've looked through this data or started to work with this data. So yeah, that's why I haven't released it, or I haven't put out a map on it. So what I'm taking, the full-time residents, is only thing that I can really kind of, I think the best, if I would say best piece of data I have right now is I got from Clatsop County voters registration.
Mhm.
And so I'm looking at voter registration data as full-time residents. And, I just don't know of anything else that we can really do. I asked our utilities department if they thought that we could figure it out through utilities as well, kind of a second layer to look at. But I just don't think that's going to be too helpful. We just can't figure that one out. Anybody else have other ideas or other data sources to look at? I'm always happy to do that. But then our short-term rental data, that's a pretty good darn data. I mean, that's the real thing. They come in and have to get a license for that. So we know where those are. Now, some of the mapping I haven't, this is all in Google Maps, so I haven't done a GIS map of it yet. So that there may be some error in that, but yeah, Jim, that's really what it is this is a, Google map, and it's kind of what I'm working with right now. Hopefully I can work with some better data, but I think that there definitely are geographic areas that are more impacted by short-term rentals, others that are more impacted by second homes, and others by commercial. So, motel, that type of thing. So,
Jeff,
anyhow.
looking at your map that you have up there right now, I'm looking at West Gogona Avenue. And I'm not sure what is that. Do those little teardrops represent, like the greenish ones represent the 14-day rentals on West Gogona Avenue?
Yeah, so green is 14-day, orange is lifetime, and purple is 5-year. Now,
well, I can tell you that's totally wrong. I can actually tell you that. I know that there are 5 short-term rentals on this street.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So what this is a Google map, right? So it's not a GIS map. So I haven't put it into my GIS system, which does it by parcel location, which is, tax lot. So I can get that data perfectly, right? This just kind of puts like Google map, when you put in a address, it kind of drops a pin at its closest proximity to your address field. And so I think it's, fairly close, but I don't think it is exactly what we were after. So,
well, yeah, it's only 20% of the truth. So that's not fairly close in my book.
So you're saying there's 5 right now on Gogana?
I'm saying that, and there is one that is an unlimited that I don't see reflected there, that I don't know when it pans out, or when it will no longer be an unlimited. And it might be that some of these people are doing it under, the guise of, rent or loaning their house to relatives, but are actually bringing in short-term. I don't know. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who do that, don't report it. So, and unless somebody blows the whistle on them, there's no way for the city to know. So I'm not really sure where the problem is on that, but I can actually, and I'll email you the addresses of all the short-term rentals.
Well, we have that on a spreadsheet. And so that's where this came from, is that spreadsheet. So not to say that, like I said, the pin drops were in their exact locations, but we have that spreadsheet, and that's where the data is pulled from.
Okay, but I'm just saying that data is inaccurate for West Gogona, and it could be inaccurate for other areas as well. I don't know. And so I think that right now we'd have to say that's pretty much of an unknown.
But Lisa, if I may ask a question, we've discussed this on the task force before, and that is that there are a lot of we call them second homes right now, that people do, in fact, and we've all said this, lend them out to their friends, their relatives, not suggesting that they do this for money, but let's just say they lend them out. And this actually creates some of the issue that has been reflected on short-term rentals too. So I guess the point is that you're actually pointing out what you've said before, is that yes, there's short-term rentals, but then there's other people abusing the system. And I would please, if you believe that these people are, I think you should turn them in just like anyone else would do. And I just don't want to get apples mixed up with oranges.
Right, but if this is
in
going
the
to
thing.
be, this data is being represented by Jeff. So I am raising the same concerns I had when it was first presented. because I think there's something not working about this, and I don't know what it is. But, you
Well,
know, I've turned
And
in people.
that's a fair statement. I think that what you just said is we don't know what's going on, but there's something that's not working. And I've heard that several times. And I think that's a fair statement. And I agree with you. I would like the city to follow up on those issues with regard to, you know, who's who in the zoo.
Well, you know, on that instance, you know, I mean, we've had, let's see, just on Gogana, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 reports of the 24 over the 3 years are from Gogana.
There's 2 short-term rental permits on Wakana.
Yeah, and there's,
That's helpful.
yeah, there's 2.
If there's more, they are either second residents or they are operating illegally or doing something different. But there are 2 permits for short-term rentals on that street.
And I don't, it shows on the map that way, on the map I did not see any short-term rentals. I mean, like some of the pin drops aren't in the right place perhaps.
Yeah, that's possible. But if you look at our list of people who have registered permits, there's 2.
Okay, then something is definitely wrong.
There's 2 on this map, so I don't understand. There's a 5-year and a 14-day. So,
Right,
know,
and that's not what's happening on the street.
well,
Because
that's
don't
what,
tell me that, and I have turned them in. I have, in fact, probably half of those things you see on there of people complaining are me. And the problem is, it's very difficult for
Well-
difficult for an enforcement officer to determine. They can go and ask the people say, no, those are our relatives. What are you going to do at that point? You can't, you know.
So Lisa, once again, this is not a data problem. Okay, so if you have this as an issue and you keep telling us it's a data problem, it's not a data problem. And I'm, you know, if you want to argue with the code and the police officers over this, that's their thing. That's not what this task force is about, is to argue over or try to pull our data and our mapping into the issue. That is not the issue right now. The issue is that you are saying that we're not enforcing our ordinances. That is the issue that you're complaining. And we've got, like I said, at least 4 from you, and they have investigated and followed up, and they have not found violations. So I cannot speak for their enforcement. I can only speak to the short-term rental task force and how we are, you know, if 24 out of 570, you know, I'm not going to be able to say that 4% of our complaints are extraordinary or something that we have to look into. You know, you guys get to make that decision. I don't make that decision. That's a short-term rental task force to look at, but I can't see that you bringing up that there's 5 on your street is really, and it's a data problem. That's not going to solve it. I'm not going to be able to create short-term rental, new short-term rental license out of 3. If you think 3 are doing it improperly, I can't make them get a short-term rental permit if that is not really what they're doing. And that's a code enforcement issue. You know, that's the policing issue. I can't make someone come in and get a short-term rental permit if they say it is their owner and it's their guest.
Okay, so you're basically saying I cannot question the data.
No, you can question any data, but just like we just said, we answered your question on the data. And that's the second time we've said there's only 2 short-term rentals. And that's what it shows.
Well, that's not how I think, Jeff. So I'm sorry. I beg to disagree with you. That's all.
Well, that's fine. I mean, you can disagree, but you know, the data that I'm showing is exactly what we would expect by putting numbers into the computer and getting it out.
I think we should move on. I'm not going to argue with this anymore.
Okay.
Well, I have a follow-up question though, Jeff, based on the, just listening to Lisa and you and talking to Dwight. So from your perspective, the data is 2010, the data is the data. I mean, it's numbers, the numbers don't lie. But as you look at violations and you look at infractions, et cetera, do you have a sense in what you do that for every, and I'm just trying to figure out a metric here, but for every time somebody brings up a violation, how many come to fruition that are truly a violation that might be used as a metric to identify that the numbers that I have represent what we believe, but we believe there might be, based on how many violations actually turn out to be true, there might be a 1% margin of error. Is there a reasonable metric to plug in there?
I really, what we might do is just get the code enforcement official at the next one. He follows up with each one of these, Bob. I know they track for weeks, license plates and who is occupying the units when they're complained about. And so like I said, they've only followed up, or only one has been seen as a violation and cited for.
Okay, which validates your data as being better than not better. And the only reason I even bring it up is, is I understand the mission of this task force. You know, we're trying to come up with a solution when all this is presented, but we all realize that there's a constituency of people abusing. And to your point, if a code enforcer says, no, this is family, there's nothing you can do. They may be lying blatantly to our face or to their face, but the reality is, from that standpoint, it becomes a non-issue because they lied, or it is really their family at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying that most of them, from my understanding, and we can talk to Travis at the next meeting, but from my understanding is they follow up on most of these and they can track them. They can track out whose ownership of those vehicles and where they're from. And they can follow up if they say it's a family member. And so
Gotcha.
that's what we do. And so,
Jeff,
That's pretty thorough. Thank you.
that brought up the question to me, and maybe the code enforcement guy is the only one that can answer this, is how many of these were investigated? Is all of them completely investigated, or are there some that don't get investigated, but
yeah, no,
if there's only 51 of these, I would imagine they're all investigated that are related to short-term or parking.
They're all investigated, and like I said, they check license plates, they follow up and take pictures of everyone that goes to there. We can bring Travis at the next meeting. He can tell you exactly and give you reports of what he does.
That would be great, because because I'm following up on one in particular, I'm taking my own pictures. I started taking them last week, just because I don't expect Travis to be down on my street every 3 or 4 days taking photographs. He can't do that. So, but I can, because I'm a neighbor. So I'm going to try and assist by providing photographs.
Yeah, so, all I can say is if you have violations or you suspected violations, just report them to Code and Compliance through our website. Call up the police station or Code Compliance, and they'll follow up on it and get back with you. And so does anyone else have any data questions?
Is there any value in doing anything until we get the new data in the spring?
What are you looking for as far as data, value?
The census information is going to come in. Would we have different homeowners? Would we have, are we going to see a change in second homeowners? Are we going to see a change in the rentals? The rental permits are going to stay the same?
Yeah, I mean, just from my suspicions of the data is that, like I said, I do suspect we're going to see changes in numbers. I really think it's probably going to be more vacant. Although with COVID, you know, we're seeing more and more people wanting to live here, you know, and make at least, they may still have 2 or 3 homes. So whether this is their permanent residence is, or what that would show up as a permanent residence, and through the data that I look at, which is voter registration, I don't know. But you know, I suspect that we're going to see some changes. I don't see us. I think we will see probably about, we might reach up to around 1,900 housing units by the new numbers. But a lot of those will still remain in their vacant through seasonal and occasional vacancies.
So this 12% drop in population is based on voter records?
No, that's population. So census.
Okay, it's a census.
Yeah, that's the latest census, you know, breakout. So they released that. That's their first issue of release. And I think, you know, we're already seeing the effects of what I would think is most of these resort communities face, is that, you know, they become second home dominant.
Hey, Jeff, just, I know I'm alternate, but just to give everybody a perspective, like this year right now, coming into fall, out of our inventory, 3 of our houses are on the market now currently. Out of those 3 that are selling they're all 14-day licenses. I know for a fact that 2 of them are going to become second homes. So they will be leaving the rental pool and becoming second homes. So we see a lot of churn that way as well.
Yeah, I suspect that as well. And honestly, with all of you, I do not even know what to expect with the COVID inflected issues. You know, I think these are big industry level kind of decisions going on, or things are happening. And there's such a housing shortage right now that I think everything's changing, and through every sector of construction. So who knows what's next? And finally, for me, before I go, is that no, I want to impress upon the fact that I love, and Lisa knows as well, because she's on my planning commission, I love a good argument. So if you question data, please feel free to question it. I mean, I just want to see better data. I want to see better numbers, right? I think there's better numbers out there. And that is one thing I agree with Lisa on, is that I think we can do better at this. Because really, if it was up to me, would I choose voter registration as permanent, you know, as sign of our best data for permanent? No, I wouldn't. Now, I don't know of any. I mean, I do think that there's better ways to parse out even residential structures. And once I get, you know, a plan or another support, I'll be happy to kind of start digging into that as well, because we can get Clatsop County's records from the assessor's office and even dig further into their numbers and compare those with our housing, our census numbers. And so that'll give us a secondary source, so that I can say, Lisa was right. And so at some future meeting, okay? So I welcome that. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks everybody for kind of staying involved in this. I do think we're, like I said, if we get interested parties from other areas, Manzanita, not just, I mean, I've had their counselors, I've had county commissioners, I've had other city councilmen and work task force and workforce, short-term rental workforces in these other communities contacting us. So I think there's a general interest across this region and across the country in understanding the short-term rental better. And I definitely do when it comes into kind of a where it overlaps with workforce and affordable housing as well. And whether it competes with it or doesn't and all of that, those are all big questions that have are really being discussed all over across the country. And I look forward to seeing better data on that and better studies on that. One of the things that I would really like to see us do, and I really like what we do, I like our 14-day license. I like our limitation on accessory dwelling units to not allow them as short-term rentals. But I really would like to see we have a 1% tax on all building permits that goes to affordable housing. I would push to at least investigate and have this committee kind of weigh in on it, on allowing us to use that 1% affordable housing money to incentivize people to build accessory dwelling units for long-term rentals for workforce housing. And so, I think that that's a way to kind of help out that area and to give more options out there for people to live in. And I know other communities are doing that. So that's part of the policy discussions I'd like to look at.
Jeff, we have Sherwood up here as affordable living. Who signs a contract with them? Is it a city contract or a county contract?
I think that's the county. I'm not sure. I can follow up on that. I know.
The reason why I was told that you don't have to live in Cannon Beach, work in Cannon Beach to live there. That there are people living in Cannon Beach, working in Seaside, and that's a big piece of our affordable housing.
Yeah, so I think that is it's a class. I think in most areas of the country, at least, most places, and unless they're a metro area, that it's done through the county for these affordable housing and workforce housing programs. But I can investigate that. But a majority of our workforce comes from other areas, so whether we should limit ours to not, I don't know if we can do that. So I'll say goodbye. Thank you, everybody. And if you guys want to continue without me, that's great. And I'll just turn it over to you guys to discuss, and then you can let Katie know if there's any questions you want to add, and I can get back to you on in an email or follow up afterwards. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Jeff, could you just send me the data so I can look at it some more?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
presentation would probably be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So this presentation is going to go out to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll be posted as well.
So are we done?
I don't know. Are we?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well, we already made a decision at our last meeting that we were not going to make any big decisions over Zoom, especially with do we even have a quorum here anyway? I mean, I don't know. We talked last time about trying to come up with some kind of a systemized way of conducting the meetings, and then decided that was not something that we could make a decision about without a full discussion in person. That's just what I remember.
Well, what I seem to remember is, yes, we need a full discussion. I don't know how the reality of being in person, given the COVID situation. But I guess the question that is also that could be raised is how many people are actually members are actually on the task force right now? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because
know.
you brought up the issue of not having a quorum. And if we don't have a quorum and we don't have any other particular something to add to Jeff's list, I don't think we should be doing organizational issues without a
Guys,
quorum.
you do have a quorum, I can let you know. You have 6 people here and 2 people missing.
Oh,
Just
thank
2
you.
people? Oh, okay. There,
So you definitely have a quorum.
I thought we
Okay.
had more people on the task force than that, but can you tell me who's missing?
Well, Lisa Frazier and
Carol McSweeney.
and Beck Sweeney.
Okay. Is there a way to see you guys again without having to look at all these these graphs? Or are they're still up on the screen on my screen? Can I get rid of them?
Oh, let me see if I can fix it. If I can unshare his screen. Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thanks. Well, I guess I'm hoping that we will be in person sometime in the not so distant future, but maybe I'm just being, naive. I'm hoping
We
that.
could all be here right now. We got spacing, we got masks. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, with 6 feet apart and masks. It's true. I prefer to be on Zoom, not just because of safety issues, but because I find it very difficult to have a comprehensive discussion through a mask. That's just my personal feeling. I find it hard to communicate with the mask on.
Bob, what do you think we should do next, or if anything, or hold it off to the next meeting?
Well, we all had agreed that there wasn't going to be a chair of this group to Lisa's point until we had a chance to kind of talk in person. All that being said, I think we have accomplished some stuff and there's some data to digest. I am, unless anybody has a specific topic they want to discuss amongst ourselves right now, I would say we table it till the next meeting. It seems like we've covered some ground. I appreciate Lisa's information, or I should say, challenging of the data. And I still wonder, and I think it'll be helpful when the enforcement officer's on the next meeting. But I think as far as this meeting is concerned, I don't have anything pressing on my end. And I think we all agree just to meet doesn't make sense, but I'm happy to stick on if anybody has something to discuss.
The only thing I have is I would like to see better, bigger maps that you can actually read. And I'm sure somebody's working on them.
And maybe getting those presentations ahead of the meeting so we can formulate questions might be a good idea too.
That's a really good point, because for me, squinting at the screen and trying to read the tiny little typeface and figure out what goes with what color, I just can't have an intelligent conversation that way.
Well, I kind of agree with you. And also, it would be interesting to get the numbers of the decrease in rentals, permanent or otherwise, because of the moratorium that the council passed some months ago, and what has been the effect of that over, was it now 8 months, or am I about right? Not quite.
I don't think it was 8 months,
And
but
that. Do you mean the short-term rental moratorium for not doing it?
For here, we're not issuing more 5-year permits.
Well,
Well,
5 years but I thought I read in that motion that the lifetime rentals will not be going with the property, but only with the owner. And that there was,
Right.
and there's no more 5 years. And then I thought there was a moratorium on the short terms too, but maybe I misunderstood.
We've stopped issuing lifetime and 5 year. And, yeah, the lifetime or the 5 year, no permits go with the property, they all are with the
Okay.
owner. But they've not stopped issuing the 14-day, that one has been continued to be issued throughout the whole time.
Well, it'd just be interesting to see since that passed, what that has done to the numbers. Just, it would be interesting to know that.
And I'd like to,
For the number of total permits or the number of nightly rentals? Which
No,
number?
the number of permits.
Oh,
I'm not worried about the nightly rentals at this point. I think a lot of, there's two sides of the coin. I'm looking at the one side of the coin about the occupancy issues and the number of rentals and how that affects the balance of residency and all those kinds of issues in Cannon Beach. And I think that's certainly one of the key points. And then there's another issue, which is kind of separate from that, but has to be taken into account, and which is what is the generation and how much was the business aspect of what the short-term rentals bring or don't bring to the city.
And I'd
Why,
like-
one of the other things I think it'll be interesting to see, that I'd be really interested, is now that the fee, because I know of at least one of my homeowners that dropped their license due to the fee going to $500.
Oh, yes, that's.
So I think we're going to see some because some of these property owners weren't making much at all on their property. So for that, they're going, I'll just use it on my own. What I'm worried about with that, and I'm not disagreeing with the increase, what I'm worried about is seeing what Lisa's seen on her street, where more and more people are dropping their licenses and then still using them for family and friends and saying, well, it's my friends that are at the house. Well, if somebody doesn't have a short-term license, they can let friends use their house all the time as long as they're not collecting money. And if they say they're not collecting money, there's nothing the city can do about it.
I think
as
they're
far as
using other platforms too. I don't think it's just about that. I think that there are
Well-
other platforms that are being used besides, going through a registered agency in the city. And what I'm going to try and do for the next meeting is gather some narratives from citizens that I know who have experienced these short-term rental issues and have made reports and what has happened from those reports. I have several friends who have been just tearing their hair out trying to get this issue straightened out on their streets. And so I think that I won't use names because I don't want to get anybody personally involved who isn't on the committee, but just a narrative about, somebody.
Lisa, I agree with you but I think part of the problem that we have in the narrative and how we talk about it is, I look at short-term rentals as licensed legal rentals within the city of Cannon Beach. That, to me, that's the short-term rental business. Now, are there people out there that illegally rent their house out? Absolutely. But I think it's second homeowners. And so I think we have to be, sometimes our professional managers get thrown into this group of short-term rentals that go along with maybe the 3 that aren't doing it legally on your street, when we're trying to play by the rules and do it. But I think it's a lot of second homes is where the problem is at. I can tell you on Pacific, between, I want to say, in that Orford area where the tennis courts are,
Right.
that they just rebuilt, there are 3 to 5 family homes there that are not short-term rentals, but they are one of the biggest I used to get calls all the time that there was parking violations at the rental I had, and it wasn't the rental, it was the second homeowner in one of those 5 homes. And that's where I think a lot of the frustration in the neighborhoods is happening, is that it's sometimes we always joke in this industry that the worst guests we ever have are children of homeowners because they have no, it's just the way it is sometimes. And I think that's part of what's going on. I don't disagree that people on your street are renting their houses. I just believe that according to the data, there's only 2 or 3 that are licensed. That doesn't mean they're not doing it, but they're not doing it legally.
And
Yeah, I think that they learn to say that too, though. They learn to answer questions. Like if you're asked, just say you're a family member.
Absolutely.
That sounds very suspicious and paranoid, and I'm not a paranoid person, but I am experiencing that myself from a neighbor. And I just,
And I
it's
don't
something
disagree
like
with you on that at all.
Hmm?
I don't disagree with you on that happening at all, because I know it does around us, because we've had people call and complain our rentals, and it's not us, it's the neighbor next door,
No, in fact, if it is with one of your with your agency, no one is, I mean, there's hardly any complaints because you make sure that they follow the rules.
Right.
But this is something where you have, maybe a new car in the driveway 2 times a week, so 8 times a month. I mean, it's incredible. And I know that nobody has that many friends and relatives from that many parts of the United States.
but I guess my point is that we need to make sure we're looking at this in 2 separate categories. There's the licensed short-term rentals, and if they are breaking the rules, they need to be punished accordingly. If they're second homeowners, that's a whole nother problem that I don't know that this task force is set up to deal with, because there's other things that have to be done in those cases. And that's
but Brian, on that note, one of the things that is the mission, if you go back to the document that's been sent out, our mission is to look at all this, including violations. Lisa's already asked for the enforcement officer to show up at the next meeting. I guess my question of all this, does it make sense? And do we all believe, and it sounds like we do, that there's enough violators out there that's skewing the data? And so to Jeff's point, the data is the data based on licenses given, but the data doesn't encompass, and he doesn't seem to have a margin of error for what we really believe are people who are violating it. And just because they say it's my cousin and it's not their cousin, how do we dig down? And one recommendation might be, should there be a specific, and I'm just saying, maybe it would be funded by the fees incurred by the people making these violations, but should there be an officer whose full-time job is to dig a little bit deeper in these violations to see if, in fact, people are lying blatantly more than we think? And that would be a discussion that would come up, I think, with the code enforcement officer next time, because I think we're all dancing around. Well, there's only 50 violations that have been reported, and they're probably digging in, like Jim said, but maybe they aren't. I'd like to know, like everybody, how much do they really dig in? And what do they believe the margin of error is? Because maybe that margin of error with fines associated would dictate a position and then some.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And the other thing, to respond to one of the issues that Lisa brought up, and that is people using different platforms. Wanted to go back to one of the presentations that Jeff has done both to the council and one time to us, and that they have a program that they license through somebody. And what they do is they can look on all, like Airbnb and a whole bunch of other services, shall we call them, platforms, where they have, they say they're in Cannon Beach, or they give an address that's in Cannon Beach, and they pull that down, and then they compare those to licenses. And then I know that he's testified to the council before that what they've done is matched them up and gone after those people. And several of those people were violators and got, what do you call it? A violation notice.
Violation. Well, and Dwight, just so you know, too, as a professional manager, I want everybody on a level playing field. I really want everybody to follow all the rules that are done. We personally helped the RV park catch somebody who was renting an RV out on Airbnb and busted them. And we also caught, everybody will love this one. 3 years ago, we caught the manager of the Elk Creek apartments. Wait, the government subsidized ones. She was renting a room out with no license, and she can't do it. So we also help enforcement, because just like Bob wants restaurants to play on the same playing field, we want all short-term rentals to be on the same. I mean, we're paying taxes. We employ 25 people with benefits and all of that. In order for me to be able to do that, it has to be a level playing field. So,
Well, Brian, so let me jump in, because I've heard you and every property manager of this sort with the same argument, and I support it, which is, people get upset with all these, non-enforcement, non-following the rules, when from my perspective, after 19 years of living here, it really does seem to be, especially being on this task force, those who are breaking the rules who aren't part of properties being managed. And I start to wonder, and so now I'm going to make a proposal to the task force. As much as we are looking at the short-term rental under the legal guides that we're trying to see it make sense, et cetera, I go back to what we began to talk about here. Maybe we need to be looking at an enforcement officer for just this. Case in point, Brian digging in to those other platforms. Nobody probably has the bandwidth to do that right now, but they're out there. And it would validate what Lisa had asked before as well. And I think with fines associated, it probably would fund itself. And maybe short term, we'd have to look at that. But the bottom line is, I think we have two buckets that we're dealing with. But I think we may have been underestimating the abuse to a point where it's, part of the collective, but should be broken out with tangible outcomes that we look for.
And Bob, like Dwight was talking about, they do have the software that goes through, but here, and so the Airbnb illegal ones, VRBO, Home to Go, all of those get picked up and caught. What's not, and where I don't know how we catch it, is the Multnomah Athletic Club, the Attorneys
Right.
Association. I've got a homeowner that belongs to a Surgeons for Rentals, kind of place. So some of those spots are real. I mean, unless you got the Multnomah Athletic Club quarterly newsletter or whatever it comes out, there's no way of the city to know that the house down the street from Lisa is being rented through that publication, because there's no electronic signature to it.
No, but to that point, under the guise of keeping honest people honest, the more enforcement that can take place,
The better off.
the better off we are, because
Yep.
once the buzz is out there that this is not something you can get away with anymore as easily as you could, people are going to really think twice, especially when the fines are there and they're not waivable. The fine is the fine, and you will pay it. And I don't even know what the consequence would be, but maybe the fines need to be evaluated in the scope of this as well to make people think twice. A parking violation for $50, some people would just shrug off, but a parking violation for 200, that's a different story. So
Right.
maybe we should be looking at that as well.
Yeah, I think widening our scope I think that actually is within our scope.
I do too.
That was, I think, if we just, I think just narrowing it to the short-term rental agencies, that they really are not so much the problem anymore, or haven't been. It's what's going on the street that matters, and whatever it is.
But
So
I
on
think we
that
need
note, I'm sorry, I just want to add, I completely agree. Can I ask, because one of the things that I've been feeling has been missing, and maybe it's just me, is on the meetings, the agenda is great, but I don't necessarily see what tangible outcomes or expectations are being brought upon us at the conclusion of the meeting. And I'd like to say, for the next meeting, we should clarify, because I think this is within our scope, we should definitely have the enforcement officer there, and we should talk about what is the potential of maybe an officer to specifically do this based on what the outcome might be. I guess I just want some tangible outcomes that aren't quite established
Right.
yet.
An agenda
agree
isn't
with
just
that.
a repeat of every other agenda we've had.
And that is a
Yes.
problem. We're just not addressing the issues that has been
Right.
given to us, and with a specific I'm not seeing any outcomes either. And I'm with you, Bob, that now, let's see, we've done this for a while. We should be moving ahead on some of this stuff.
Instead, we're looking at the same charts, the same old data, and, rehashing it, and that's it. That's all we've done.
So I think,
So maybe at the next time he sends out an agenda, he's open to suggestions to add to the agenda. We should add to the agenda. We should, and I really think the enforcement officer coming in will make a big difference. I'm not interested in putting anybody on the hot seat at all. And I know that is not, it's not fair to the enforcement officer because he's doing the best he can with what he has, his tools. I don't know how much leeway he's given or anything, but it'd be very interesting to find out.
Well, so on that note, Lisa, and I would agree, why don't we get into the minutes and get back to Jeff with this, since I know notes are being taken, that it's not just a suggestion that the enforcement officer be here for the next meeting. We're asking that it happen. I'm not sure we can, but we'd also have a list of questions ahead of time so we can get some answers. So we're not just waiting yet again for another cycle to get back with answers. Why don't we start creating some of the questions for that officer now so that he or she can look at them and come to the meeting with them?
That's a great idea.
May I suggest two things? First, on that issue, Bob, is that we ask as a group that each of us provide the top three questions for the investigator officer who's going to come, so that we can at least have, and to Jeff, like maybe a month ahead of time or 3 weeks ahead of time, so he can put them together and then give them to the officer so he could have answers to them. And then the second issue is, I'm wondering if it would be helpful if each of us separately make a list of the top three issues that we see are confronting the overall task force from our perspective, and submit them to Jeff and have them just put them in I don't have a problem being identified with my three, and they all have a list down. So we end up with, there's 8 of us. So that would be 20, last I checked, 24, 24 on the list. And I think, excuse me, and that's not COVID related. I think that we might be surprised that several of us have very similar, on both sides of the coin or in the middle of the coin, have very similar concerns. And then we'll be able as a group to hone in on and put that in front of Jeff and say, these are our top concerns and we want to move ahead on these issues as it relates to our scope.
Is there a way to send these questions and to the whole group? I mean, can we use we can use the task force,
Portal
grouping that he uses, the portal, because I'd like to be able to see what everyone else is thinking and to share mine, ahead of time, my questions.
I certainly agree. If we send them all to Jeff and let him combine those and get those out to us.
Yes, that was my perspective. And
but
also it helps if Jim, if I may say, if it helps to get it to Jeff, because I could easily make a typographical or spelling error, and that him and his staff could take a look at it and format it correctly.
We won't judge you.
He can get it back to me and say, I think this was wrong. Is this what you meant? And I'd say, oh yeah, I'm sorry. And
so let's have this come from Katie then, since I think she's driving from the assistant standpoint. Is that right, Katie?
Yes, yeah.
So let it come from Jeff's office via Katie to however, and I would say to everybody's point, sooner than later, because I think what we're all saying out loud, and maybe not, and some who aren't talking probably thinking it, is we keep recycling the same information, but I don't feel we're getting any traction. I feel like I just keep getting data, but we're not responding or giving any direction. And I'd like to see us move forward. I mean, this is very productive, period. And so I'd like to see more of that. And so if the questions come sooner than later, we get back sooner or later, ask Jeff to make sure that we get the data once it's compiled and within a minimum of 2 weeks, if not sooner, of a meeting, and by being further out so we can really digest it. And then of course, that this whole thing with the enforcement officer, I'm really keyed in on what Lisa said. And and what Brian's been saying, I really think that there's a bigger issue here, and it's somewhat of a separate issue to the day-to-day proper management of short-term rentals. But that's just me talking.
So I move that we agree with Bob. I might suggest, Bob, that we put 30 days before the next meeting as a timeline for us to get our information into Katie.
I like it.
I do too. I don't think we can force anybody on this committee to do that, but it's a great suggestion and I would like to participate in it.
So that's 3 votes. How about Brian and Jim?
I can't vote because I'm an alternate. I would
Oh, I'm
ask
sorry.
that I would ask that I'm allowed to add some questions. You can take them or not, I don't care. But I would ask to be allowed to do that. I realize I'm an alternate, so I can't vote, Dwight. Thanks for asking, but I think you're going in the right direction.
If he was a real person. I'd have to double check. Brian, are you sure you're not a real person? Because I thought we had enough drop-offs that you made the cut now.
No.
Okay.
Council did.
You were, I was next in line, gave up my spot when Claudia left, so you took it,
Okay.
which was great. And so I think right now, unless somebody else drops off, I'm still the alternate.
That's
Well, I'd still like to have your questions because I think you've come from a posture of knowledge, and I think it makes a lot of sense to get your input.
Okay.
I think, the broader the questions are, the better.
I fully support this as well. So you have my yay vote.
so we are unanimous then.
Yeah.
Of
Wow.
those attending. Well, we don't
And-
want to
and might I-
suggest that they're not we're not speaking for the 2 that are not here. I just want to be clear on that so that
Yeah.
they don't feel left out.
I concur. And might I add, because I want to make sure it was covered in Katie's notes, that as Jeff is putting together the agenda for future meetings, that a suggested desired outcome and what we'll be potentially voting on or agreeing on would be listed. So we have time to think about that as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, I'm hoping these questions will help guide that next meeting and what we need to talk about.
Amen.
Good. All right.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Yeah, I second.
I third. Let's get out of here.
Okay, have a good month or 2.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.